I keep a government secret that most people in Washington would trade their careers to know. But to my aunt, I am just the girl who married badly, divorced quietly, and never quite figured out her life. The Christmas Eve dinner was supposed to be simple. My grandmother's house in Naperville, Illinois. The kind of old colonial with a wraparound porch that looks like it belongs on a greeting card. Candles in the windows. The smell of pot roast and cinnamon. My cousin in from Boston. Everyone crowded around a table that was never quite big enough. I had driven 4 hours from DC in a rental car because mine was in the shop. A Kia, with a cracked windshield and a check engine light I had been ignoring for 2 weeks. I pulled into the driveway and sat there for a moment with the engine running, watching my breath fog in the Illinois cold. I wasn't nervous about seeing family, I was tired. The kind of tired that doesn't come from a long drive. I had been awake for 31 hours before I started that drive. There had been a situation. There is always a situation. I got out, grabbed the Hostess wine I had picked up at a gas station outside of Joliet, and walked to the front door. My aunt opened it before I could ring the bell. "Jade," she said, not quite smiling. She looked at the wine, then at my coat, a black wool thing I had owned for 6 years, then at my face, which I knew was gray with fatigue. "You look exhausted. Are you sleeping?" "Long drive," I said. She stepped back to let me in. The house smelled like my grandmother, like lavender and something baking. My chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with the cold. My cousin was already there. He always arrived first to anything. He was standing by the fireplace with a glass of something amber, wearing a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly car insurance, laughing at something my uncle had just said. When he saw me, he held up his glass. "Jade, finally." "Hey, Miles," I said. He was 32, 2 years older than me, and he had the particular ease of someone who had never once in his life felt like the least important person in a room. He was a hospitality consultant. He worked with luxury hotel brands, redesigned their guest experience protocols, flew business class to Dubai and Singapore, and came home with stories that my aunt retold at every family gathering as though she had lived them herself. He was good at his job. I did not begrudge him that. What I begrudged was the way my aunt held him up every single time I was in her field of vision, like he was a flashlight and I was the proof that the room had been dark before he arrived. Dinner was the usual production. My grandmother had set the table with the good china, the stuff that only came out at Christmas and Easter, blue and white with a gold rim that had been chipping since the 90s. I sat between my uncle and a decorative basket of pine cones. My cousin sat at my grandmother's right hand, which was the seat of honor and had been his since we were children. The pot roast was passed around. My aunt served my cousin first, piling his plate with the best pieces, the center cut, the one with the most juice around it. By the time the platter got to me, it was mostly the dry edges. I did not say anything. I took what was there and passed it along. "Miles got another client," my aunt announced, before we had even started eating. "The Ashford Group. They have 4 properties on the East Coast and 2 in Europe. They reached out to him." "That's great," my grandmother said. "It's really great," my aunt said, looking at me in that specific way. The look that was not quite a smile and not quite a frown, but lived in the uncomfortable space between the two. "It's nice when you work hard and people actually recognize it." I cut a piece of pot roast. I chewed. I said nothing. This was, I had learned, the correct strategy. My aunt's remarks did not require response. They required endurance. I had been enduring them since I was 19 years old, when I took a federal job out of college instead of the marketing position at my uncle's firm that she had arranged for me without asking. That was the original sin. Everything since then had been its long, slow consequence. "And what are you up to these days, Jade?" my uncle asked. He was a genuinely kind man who asked this question every time we were in the same room, and genuinely seemed to forget the answer each time. "Same work," I said. "She does something with the government," my aunt translated for the benefit of the table, in the tone of someone explaining that their niece had chosen a career in taxidermy. "Some kind of analyst. We have never really understood exactly what that means." "Policy research," I said. "For who?" "A federal agency." "Which one?" "I can't really say." My aunt smiled. It was a smile I knew well. It was the smile of someone who believed they had just confirmed something, See, she always says that. She's been saying that for 6 years. I'm sure there's a very good reason. She said it in a way that made clear she was sure there was not. My cousin looked uncomfortable. He looked down at his plate. Probably just bureaucracy, my uncle offered kindly. A lot of these jobs have NDAs and all of that. NDAs are for people doing things worth protecting, my aunt said, and laughed at her own joke, in that tinkling way she had, like she was performing laughter for an audience slightly out of earshot. I'm sure it's very meaningful work, Jade. Someone has to keep the filing cabinets organized. I took a sip of water. Across the table, my grandmother was watching me. She was 81 and had survived 3 presidents she despised and 1 war that killed a boy she had loved before she married my grandfather. She had a very precise radar for when someone was holding themselves still by force of will. She gave me a small nod. I returned it. After dinner, we moved to the living room. My grandmother's Christmas tree was the same fake one she had owned for 20 years, with the bent third branch that tilted slightly left, and the glass ornaments my mother had made in the 80s. I stood near the window with my wine, watching the snow that had started during dessert. My cousin came to stand beside me. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "She means well." "I know," I said. "She's proud of me, and she doesn't know how to separate that from putting you down. I've told her." "Miles, it's fine." "It's not." He turned to look at me. "She told my friend David that you work in data entry for the federal government, like some kind of GS4. I looked at him. "When?" "Last month. His wife works at state. She was asking about you and..." He shook his head. "His wife knew your name, Jade. She got very quiet and changed the subject." I looked back at the snow. He knew something was off. He had known for a while. We were close as kids, Miles and I, before the adult years pulled us into different orbits. He still had enough of that old closeness to read the silence I was currently keeping. "What do you actually do?" he asked quietly. "I told you, policy research." "Right." He looked at me sidelong. "And what does that mean exactly?" I didn't answer. My aunt's voice carried from the couch where she was holding court, describing Miles's most recent hotel project in Singapore to my uncle and my grandmother, who was politely listening and almost certainly thinking about something else. Something about the way my aunt described it, the way she performed the pride. Something snapped. I did not plan what happened next. I want to be clear about that. I had kept this silent for 6 years, not because I was ashamed of it, but because silence was not a personal preference. It was a professional condition. When you work where I work, silence is not a choice. It is an oath. But she had called me a filing cabinet to my cousin's friend's wife, who worked at state, who had gone quiet, and I was 31 hours short of sleep. "You know what?" I said, to no one in particular. "I'm going to get a glass of water." I walked to the kitchen. My cousin followed me. "Jade," his voice was low. "Hey, are you okay?" "I'm fine." I ran the tap and filled a glass and stood there for a second looking at the water. My reflection in the dark window over the sink looked back at me. I looked like I felt, which was not great. "She doesn't know," Miles said. "That's all it is. If she knew what you actually did, she wouldn't." "What if I told you," I said quietly to the window, "that your friend David's wife at state, she would know my division's contact number by heart, because we coordinate on certain things." Miles went very still. I turned around. "What?" he said. "I'm saying that the people who know what I do don't need me to explain what I do. And the people who don't know are not supposed to know. That's the whole point." "Jade." His voice was different now. He was looking at me the way people look at something that has unexpectedly shifted its shape. "Who do you work for?" "I work for a federal agency." "Which one?" I looked at him. I looked at him for a long time. Then I said one word. A single word that I will not repeat here because it was never supposed to leave the building where I first spoke it out loud. A word that I said quietly, without drama, without any particular expression on my face. Just a word. My cousin sat down. He did not choose to sit down. His legs chose it for him. He stared at me. He said, "You're serious." I shouldn't have said that. "Jade, Jade." I shouldn't have said that, and you will not repeat it. "Of course I won't repeat it. He stopped. He put his hand over his mouth for a moment. Mom has been telling everyone you work in data entry. I know. She told David's wife, Miles. She called you, he stopped again. The color of his face had changed in a way that had nothing to do with the wine or the Christmas tree lights. He was putting things together. He was thinking about the things my aunt had said at dinner. The filing cabinet comment, the NDA's remark, the long history of dinners just like this one, and placing them against the single, quiet word I had just spoken in his grandmother's kitchen. "Oh my God," he said. "She doesn't know." "No one knows," I said. "That's the job." He sat there for a moment. Then something shifted behind his eyes, and he stood up, and he walked back into the living room. I stayed in the kitchen a moment longer. I rinsed my glass. I dried my hands on the dish towel, the one with the little reindeer that had been hanging by the sink since the 90s. I looked out the window at the snow. Then I walked back into the living room. My aunt was still talking. She'd moved on from the Singapore hotel to a story about the New Year's party she was planning. Something at a venue she had booked downtown, a rooftop place that cost what I made in a month before taxes. She was describing the appetizers. Miles sat down across from her. He looked at her and he said, "Mom, stop." She blinked. "What?" "Stop." His voice was quiet, not unkind, but final in the way that very few voices are actually final. "I was just saying that the venue requires a deposit buy." "I know what you were saying. I'm asking you to stop." My grandmother looked at him, then at me. Then she reached over and picked up her wine glass and took a very deliberate, untroubled sip. She had known something was happening all night. She was choosing to let it. My aunt looked at Miles with an expression that was working very hard to be offended and finding the job more difficult than usual. "Miles, sweetheart, I don't know what. You told David that Jade works in data entry. Well, you've been telling people that for years, that she's basically a secretary, that she doesn't really do anything." He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "She's not a secretary, Mom." My aunt's eyes moved to me. They moved back to my son. "I know that she does. You don't know. That's what I'm telling you. You don't know, and neither do I, not really. But I know enough to tell you that what you said to David was not just embarrassing, it was." He stopped. He shook his head. He was careful with the next words because he was also careful with what he knew. "It was wrong, and it was wrong every time you've done it. I was trying to. I know what you were trying to do." He looked at her steadily. "You do it every time she's in the room. You've done it my whole life, and I let you because it made things easier, and that wasn't fair to her." The room was quiet. The fire snapped. Outside the window, the snow was coming down harder. My aunt looked at me. The social armor she had worn so effortlessly her entire adult life had slipped, just slightly, in the way expensive clothes sometimes catch on something unexpected and show the seam. She was 63 years old, and she had spent those years being the one who knew more, who had done more, whose children had achieved more. It was a very specific kind of hunger. I had spent my whole adult life on the receiving end of it without ever quite understanding where it came from. "Jade," she said, and then she stopped. I waited. "I don't," she pressed her lips together. "I never meant to suggest that your work wasn't." "You've been saying it for 6 years," I said. My voice was even. "Practiced evenness is the first thing they teach you, not the content of what you say, but the delivery of it. Calm is a tool. Every holiday, every time we're in the same room, I'm the one who didn't figure it out. I'm the one who took the safe government job, the filing cabinets." I looked at her. "You said that to my face twice this year." She opened her mouth. "I don't want an apology tonight," I said. "I want you to know that I heard every time, that it registered, that the reason I never corrected you wasn't because you were right." She was quiet for a long time. The fire crackled. My uncle stared into his wine glass with the focused attention of a man who wished he were somewhere else. My grandmother set down her glass and said in the particular voice she used when she had decided a conversation was over, "Who wants dessert? I made the rum cake." That was Christmas Eve. The months that followed were quieter than I expected. My aunt did not call me. I did not call her. We existed in a parallel silence, which was fine. Silence. I understood. What I had not expected was my mother. She called me the first Sunday in February, and I could hear in her voice the particular quality that meant she'd been composing this phone call for several days. My mother was a gentle woman who had never in her life started an argument on purpose, and who occasionally found herself in the aftermath of one, and was not sure how she had arrived there. "I just think," she said, "that you might consider reaching out to your aunt. She was upset after Christmas." "She was upset," I said. "You embarrassed her." "She called me a filing cabinet in front of my cousin's friend's wife who works at State Mom." "I know, but you know how she is." "I do know how she is. That's exactly why I said what I said." "What did you say? Miles won't tell me." "I know." A pause. "Jade, what do you actually do?" This was the version of the question I had been avoiding my whole adult life. Not the coworker version, not the date version, not the awkward party version. The mother version. She asked it with the specific timbre of someone who had been patient for 6 years and had finally run out of patience by proxy. "I work for a federal agency," I said. "I do policy work. I can't tell you more than that, and I never will be able to. And I need you to understand that's not because I don't trust you. It's because that's the job." "Are you safe?" I thought about the past 18 months. "Yes," I said, "I'm fine." She was quiet for a moment. "Your father would be proud of you," she said finally. "I know that much." My throat tightened. My father had been a quiet man who worked for 30 years in a job he never discussed at dinner and drove a 10-year-old Volvo and built birdhouses in the garage on weekends. He died of a heart attack at 58. I was 24. I had been at work when it happened, and what I had been doing at work was something I would carry for the rest of my life and never be able to describe to anyone who wasn't already cleared to know it. "Thanks, Mom," I said. "I'm not going to push you to call your aunt." "Okay. But I want you to know that she's not a bad person, Jade. She's frightened. She's always been frightened. She had a daughter who she thought was going to be brilliant, and then she wasn't. And then she had Miles, and Miles was wonderful, but he wasn't a daughter. And then there's you." A pause. "You remind her of everything she was afraid of not being." I sat with that for a while after we hung up. I sat with it in my apartment, which was small and faced a brick wall and was furnished mostly from a moving sale, because I had moved 4 times in 6 years and had stopped investing in things that needed to be packed. I sat with the information that my aunt was frightened of me, not dismissive of me. That the years of filing cabinet comments and the dry edges of pot roast and the eye flick to Miles every time she wanted to establish a point, that all of it came from somewhere specific and small and afraid. It didn't undo the years, but it changed the shape of them a little. 14 months later, on a Thursday afternoon in April, I was standing at my kitchen counter eating cereal because I had not slept and had forgotten to get groceries, when Miles called. "She's in the hospital," he said. "Cedars, they admitted her last night." I put down the cereal bowl. "What happened?" "Stroke." His voice was even, the way voices are when people are holding something very large, very carefully. "It was a small one. They say she's going to be okay, but she lost some movement on her left side. They don't know how much is going to come back." "When?" "I'm leaving tonight." "I'll meet you there," I said. He paused. "You don't have to." "I'll meet you there, Miles." I rearranged 3 things and got on a plane. The hospital was in Los Angeles, where my aunt and uncle had relocated 4 years ago for the weather. I took a cab from LAX directly, and I walked into the room in the same clothes I had been wearing since the night before, which were not impressive clothes. My aunt was smaller in the bed than I had ever seen her. She was 63 years old, and she had always managed, through effort and discipline, to look like someone who was winning a competition she had invented. Not now. The left side of her face drooped slightly, and her hand on top of the blanket was a stranger's hand, thin and very still. She looked at me when I came in. Her eyes were clear. "Jade," she said. The left side of her mouth didn't move quite right, but the word came out recognizably. "Hey," I said. My uncle stood up from his chair. He shook my hand and then held it for a moment with both of his, the way men of his generation hold hands when they are grateful. Then he said he was going to get coffee and left us. I pulled the chair up to the bed and sat down. My aunt looked at me for a long time without saying anything. There was something about her eyes that was different. The specific quality of social performance that she had maintained as long as I had known her, the armor, the calculations, the perpetual measuring of the room, it was gone. What was left underneath was a woman I did not quite recognize. "You came," she said. "Of course." "You didn't have to." "I know." She looked at the ceiling. Then, slowly and with some difficulty, she said, "Miles told me I was wrong. After Christmas," she stopped to breathe. "He didn't tell me what you said, but he told me I had been unfair to you for a long time." I waited. "I knew it before he said it," she said. "I knew it before Christmas. I knew it the first time I did it, probably." She looked at me. "I don't know why I kept doing it." "I think I do," I said. Something moved across her face. "Your mother? She knows you." She was quiet for a while. The machines beeped their patient rhythm. Through the window, Los Angeles was doing what Los Angeles does, which is to say it was bright and indifferent and enormous. "I was jealous of you," she said. It sounded like it cost her something. "You have this." She searched for the word. "Stillness." "You always had it. Even when you were a little girl. You never needed anyone to tell you that you were okay. I spent my whole life needing that." She paused. "And I hated you a little for not needing it." I sat with that. "You don't have to forgive me," she said. "I'm not here to forgive you or not forgive you," I said. "I'm here because you're my family, and because Miles called me, and when Miles calls me, I show up. That's it." She looked at me for a long time. Then something in her face changed, very quietly, like a small piece of machinery finally releasing tension it had been holding for too long. "Okay," she said. "Soft." "Okay," I said. She recovered. It took 8 months, longer than the doctors first estimated, but she recovered most of the movement in her hand and almost all of her speech. Miles flew out every 3 weeks. I called every 3 weeks. I called every Sunday. We did not pretend the years before hadn't happened, and we did not perform a closeness we had not yet earned. We did something harder and slower, which was just to be honest and to keep showing up. The January after her stroke, I was promoted. The official ceremony was small and classified, which meant there was no rooftop venue, no appetizer spread, no announcement at a holiday dinner. There was a room and a few people and a document and a handshake. That was all. But later that evening, I called my mother. "Good day at work?" she asked. "Really good day," I said. She knew better than to ask further, but I could hear her smile through the phone. The specific warmth of a woman who has decided to trust a thing she cannot fully see. I stepped out onto the balcony of my apartment with a glass of red wine. The city below was doing its evening thing, lights coming on in windows, traffic moving and stopping, 1,000 separate lives running alongside each other without intersection. I thought about my father and his 10-year-old Volvo and his birdhouses. I thought about the night in my grandmother's kitchen when I had said the one word I was never supposed to say outside a secure room, and what it had cost, and what it had cost, and what it had changed. I thought about my aunt in her hospital bed, and the look on her face when the armor came off, and how much younger she had looked underneath it. I was 31 years old. I had a clearance that did not have a name most people would recognize, an apartment facing a brick wall, a nearly empty refrigerator, and a job that I would spend the next 30 years of my life being unable to describe at Christmas dinner. I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I raised my glass to the dark. There's a version of this story where I never say the word, where I sit in my grandmother's kitchen, rinse my glass, and walk back out to the living room and endure the rest of Christmas Eve the same way I had endured every Christmas Eve before it. Quietly, completely, without leaving a mark. I used to think that version was the stronger one. That restraint was the whole point. And maybe it was for a long time. But I've learned, slowly and not without cost, that there's a difference between discipline and disappearance. I was so committed to the silence that I had let someone fill it for me, and what she filled it with was the wrong story entirely. What I think about now, looking back, is the cause and the effect of it all. My aunt did not wake up one morning and decide to be cruel. She arrived at cruelty through years of small, unexamined choices, choosing her fear over her fairness, choosing her need to elevate her son over her willingness to see me clearly. And I, for my part, arrived at that kitchen moment through years of choosing patience over honesty. Until the patience ran out and the honesty came out sideways, in a single word I was never supposed to say. Everything had a reason. Everything had a cost. What I carried out of that Christmas and out of the hospital room where my aunt lay smaller than I had ever seen her was something I am still working out how to name. It isn't forgiveness exactly, though. I did forgive her. Or at least I stopped carrying the weight of what she had done as though it belonged to me. It's more like clarity. The clarity that comes when you finally stop waiting for someone to see you and just go ahead and be yourself, fully, in the room where they are standing. My father used to say that your character is the thing you protect when no one is watching. I thought for a long time that meant keeping your head down, doing the work, not asking for recognition, and there's truth in that, the discipline of showing up, day after day, to something hard and invisible and unglamorous. That takes a kind of inner steadiness that I think is the foundation of everything else. You have to know who you are before you can hold the line when someone tells you you're not. But the other part, the part I had to learn the hard way, is that integrity is not just about what you do in the dark. It's about what you're willing to hold on to in the light, when someone is looking directly at you and telling you the wrong story about yourself. Miles showed me that when he sat down across from his mother on Christmas Eve and said stop, he didn't have the full picture. He never did. But he had enough honesty in him to use what he knew, and that was enough. And my aunt in that hospital bed with the armor finally off. She showed me that it is never too late to tell the truth about yourself, even when the truth is small and frightened and not particularly flattering. That took its own kind of courage, a different kind than I practice, but real. I am still the person with the brick wall view and the near-empty refrigerator and the job I will spend the rest of my life not describing at dinner. I am not sure that will ever change. But I know who I am inside that life, and I know why I chose it, and that knowledge is load-bearing. It holds everything else up. That's enough. It has always been enough. I just need it long enough to believe it,